Archer will give the ball to McClendon. He leaps. Oh! He doesn't get in. He fumbled the football. Carolina holds. The game is over. And Carolina has won the game.
With 5 seconds, he's going to throw it. Howard leaps. He has it. Touchdown. Carolina back from the dead to tie the game with 2 seconds to go. There is a flag down, but holy smokes.
Duke 2 and 4 in overtime games. Carolina 1 and 3. Here from under center. Give off to Greg Little. Little pulls away. Little is going to score. Carolina wins.
Snap back, spot down. The kick is cleanly away. It is good!
And
Nick
it's
Weiler with
yes,
a 54-yard field goal. And how about them Tar Heels? They do it!
Possible win. Snap, spot, kick away, high enough, long enough. It's good! It's good! Carolina has won the game on a 42-yard field goal by freshman Hunter Burns.
In his end zone. The punt, very high. Switzer will have room to return it. He fields it at the 40. Coming near side, Switzer at the 50. Switzer, 45, cuts back at the 40. 35, breaks a tackle at the 30. Still on his feet. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Ryan Switzer for 6. He is doing his best Giovanni Bernard impression. Ryan Switzer again. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
As it's the Heel Tough Blog podcast here, as we sit a day before the Tar Heels return to the field on Saturday afternoon against the Syracuse Orange, looking to get to 5-0 after their 4-0 start to the season, the first since 1997. I am away this weekend, which is why you see a different background. You honestly see a clearer picture, which may or may not be a good thing. But we will still be, of course, covering the game as we always do on the Heel Tough Blog side of things, as well as here on the podcast side of things. So make sure that you guys are keeping tabs on all of that. So in the meantime, we will roll on as we normally do with these editions of the podcast. Bud, you do look like a man that has been working in the mornings here these last couple of days. You all right?
I'm fine.
Okay. I just wanted to check. You've had to take over on the Mac and Bone show for me in the mornings for WFNZ on the main airwaves. So appreciate you doing that. Also, yesterday, we'll talk about here first, of course, is that Tez Walker finally eligible. You actually wrote the article yesterday because, of course, this would be news that would come down as I was sitting on the runway getting ready to take off for my flight to New York. So it only makes sense that that story comes down at that time. But he is now officially eligible after 4 games of sitting out, after just months of battling back and forth, of comments being hurled, towards the other side both ways. This finally has a resolution, and it's the resolution that we were hoping they would reach. But even when the resolution comes down, there has to be a shot taken. But overall, just wanted to know your initial thoughts on the news being revealed yesterday, and what's your reaction to what was said afterwards from the NCAA?
Yeah, I mean, it's about time they made the right decision regarding Tez's eligibility. Unfortunately, he cannot get those 4 games back. And I think it's going to make it harder for him to apply for an extra year college eligibility if he were to so choose it. I don't think it's going to matter. I think he's going to play his 8 games or whatever, then probably go pro. But So you hate it that he had to miss those 4 games because of the NCAA's stupidity. I think I echoed this back from what I said back when this became public and Mack Brown started fighting this publicly. It's one of the reasons why you're glad Mack Brown's your head coach. The guy might have his fair share of shortcomings on Saturdays. And ultimately, that's the most important thing, is that you want him to be at his best on Saturdays. But he is, in my opinion, one of the few coaches that are still doing it to benefit kids. He's not in it for the money or the fame or anything. He's just there to help these kids reach their goals, both on the football field and off of it. He wasn't going to stop fighting until he got this resolved. And so I'm glad that finally did come to fruition. And on the NCAA side of this, I mean, what cowards? You finally do something right, albeit a month into the season. And in the
let's not give him too much credit.
And in the statement regarding his case being turned over, you don't take any blame, and you blame a university that quote unquote withheld information. No, the information that was withheld was they showed you, we're going to take you to court. You can't beat us in court, and you've lost to us in court once within the last 6 years. Do you want to do it again and become an even bigger embarrassment and an even bigger mockery to college football and the world of college athletics? No, you don't. And so, I know the NCAA is dying a slow death. I think this process, this case, only sped the death up even more. Because I told you guys in the preseason, one of my bold predictions was that I thought no matter what, this was going to be Mack Brown's last year in Chapel Hill. And he was going to move on to another challenge, which was being the guy to take down the NCAA. Yesterday didn't help that case for them, because he's already proven he's willing to do the fight publicly. And that's what the fight's going to need. It needs someone that's willing to take the charge and make it public, to force the pressure on them. He's done that for the last 2 months. And then for them to still get blamed while doing absolutely nothing wrong, I think is only going to tick off our head coach even more. And once we're done, enjoying this great season that I think we're still going to have, I think Mack Brown will be able to say, look, I accomplished my goal. I made the football program relevant again. It's a better job now than it was 5 years ago. And the next thing I do before, I retire for good is I'm going to take down a governing body that has hindered student athletes literally since the time it came to be in the 1900s.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that that's ultimately what this ends up resulting in, because, I mean, it was just a shameless look all around that, the thing that we hear is from the NCAA yesterday is that they withheld information, which I'm with you. I don't believe that for a second. And Bubba Cunningham came out and made it very clear within moments of the NCAA statement coming out that that's a complete lie. They're full of it. And I mean, we wouldn't expect anything different. That makes a lot of sense. But, for them, I mean, pretty much they admitted at one point as well, towards the end of their statement, that it was because of how the Tar Heels brass handled this. So basically, they admitted to punishing a kid because they did not like the backlash that they received from this. Also, I think it goes back to what you were talking about earlier. You said, look, they've defeated them once, they'll defeat them again. Well, it ultimately goes back to that. They're still angry about being defeated over the academic scandal that they tried to take into their own hands when it didn't involve them. And now it's resulting in them looking like morons in this situation. So, I mean, for them to accuse Carolina of withholding information on this situation, which we know is not true at all, because Carolina, why would you withhold information and then be that strong in your comments afterwards, basically laying out the argument that you already had? That makes absolutely no sense. So I think the NCAA at this point is really just making things up. And I'm glad that, our higher ups and especially Mac Brown have really continued to push the issue to try to get this kid eligible. Because it would have been easy after, you go through the initial waiver getting denied and maybe one appeal to just say, okay, look, you're not getting approved this year. We're going to move on. We're going to focus with the guys that we have. And look, you got a receiving core that's playing really well right now, even with him not on the field. So it would have made sense. But that's not at all the approach that they have taken. They have taken a much more aggressive approach, and it's really worked out for them. And now he's eligible. This is huge for the Tar Heels in so many different ways. And look, I think first, you have to talk about the people that were able to, sort of get this case to go in this direction. 6 lawyers that were hired on his behalf: Elliot Abrams, Hart Miles, Will Griabi, I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm sorry if that's wrong. Chris Griabi and Swain Wood. I think that's 5 of the 6 that were a part of it. And of course, you have the state attorney general, Josh Stein, which was basically the guy that said, look, if you don't want to make him eligible, then we're going to go to court, and I'm going to show how this is against your antitrust laws. And so I think all of that combined, and I know there's a lot of people that are mad about the amount of people that got involved with this situation. And frankly, I don't really care. Just stick it up where the sun don't shine, because this kid should have been eligible without having to get all these people involved. You saw how many different, student athletes, not only in the sport of football, but in the sport of basketball in the last couple of weeks, that got approved as 2-time transfers that weren't grad transfers. And the stories had nowhere near the amount of things that met the criteria for Tez Walker to be approved. So great job by this group to fight for him to get on the field. Now he does. Now the ultimate question is, what does this mean on the field? And also, we have to talk about it this week. So, overall, I think he's going to have a pretty big effect on this passing game. I think now, especially with J.J. Jones emerging, you're talking about Nate McCullum, J.J. Jones, and Tez Walker potentially being your starting receivers. You'll have Kobe Paysor, who can now sort of flex between the slot and the outside, and help out wherever he's needed, play some nice rotational reps. And I think, that's ultimately what Carolina was hoping they would be able to do when they, first brought in these transfer receivers. So, man, the Tar Heels are in pretty good shape right now at the wide receiver position. And then when it comes to this week, that's the interesting part. How involved do they get him? And so I'll let you start there. How involved do you think he'll be this week?
I think that's what's got me the most nervous. I kind of compared, even though it's not the same situation, but, you go back last year, that Georgia Tech game was the week that Carolina really ramped up the Drake May Heisman Trophy conversation, because at the time the Heisman was up for grabs, right? Caleb Williams, who would emerge as the rightful winner, hadn't yet really had his moment to solidify himself as the best player in the country. What you saw on the field on that Saturday was a distracted football team, and a distracted football team that didn't have its mind in the right place, and they lost a game they shouldn't have lost. Hopefully, because you add this into the fact that Carolina under Mac Brown 0-4 coming off of byes. Now, granted, 3 of those 4 losses have come to Notre Dame, so those losses make a lot of sense, because it's very hard for Carolina to beat Notre Dame, just the way that those programs are ran. Now you add this on top of it. You do worry, is the game plan going to be to funnel him the football? Because he is playing in front of what's going to be a charged up home crowd. It's going to be one of the bigger games in the ACC this weekend. And what you don't hope is that you take a passing game that's in rhythm, that has found an identity outside of him, trying to find a new one with him. He needs to be integrated back in slowly. He's going to play because they have prepared for him to play every week, because they were hoping at some point this was going to become reality. He was going to be a member of the team, was very involved with scout team drills and the like. So he's probably in about as good a football shape as he can be without not having played a single down so far in 2023. But I do think there is some slight concern about, because you see this all the time when players come back from injuries or something like that. They just try to force getting them involved and getting them established early. But Carolina's got, you got Kobe Paysour, you've got J.J. Jones, you've got guys that were starting to win their one-on-one routes. Those guys not to be they're not to be taken away just with Tez Walker being back in the fold. You need to integrate him back, and I think if they do it right, it'll be a slow process, but one that over time will make this offense more explosive and more dynamic.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be interesting once that. I'm not necessarily with you. I don't know if they're going to force him the ball. I really do think that they'll be smart about it. I think you've got Nate McCullum playing well, and J.J. Jones is playing the best football of his career so far. So I do think that they'll probably lean on those guys a lot in this game. I think you'll see as it goes along, it'll be a little bit different. I think then you'll start to see these guys sort of, he'll start to work himself in. You might see some of these guys be rotated out. The good news is I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And, for him, I think one thing that he has going for him is that the connection that he developed with Drake May in the offseason was very strong. And you could see that already by spring ball. It was, he was probably his favorite receiver. I think ultimately they'll be fine. I really do. I think Drake will be smart about how he uses them. And I think he's going to give you something over the top that guys, like J.J. Jones, who's had a good year going deep, Gavin Blackwell, who's made some plays down the field. Those guys couldn't bring you exactly what Tez Walker is going to bring you. So I really do think, he can only help Carolina in this circumstance. But look, at the same time, Carolina's got a lot of other things that they have to do against a Syracuse team that comes in at 4 of their first loss of the year. People are kind of wondering, is this the exact same thing that we've seen year in and year out here recently from Syracuse? The Tar Heels looking to get to 5-0. The winner of this game likely sets up a primetime matchup with their next opponent. So Carolina would love to set up that primetime matchup with what you would expect to be an undefeated Miami team who faces a Georgia Tech team that last week lost to Bowling Green at home. So if Carolina wins this one, it could set up that huge matchup, which would be in the middle of a 3-game homestand. This is the 7th meeting between the Tar Heels and the Orange. The series is split at 3 apiece. In the last meeting, of course, back in that 2020 opener, the first game during the COVID era, no fans in the stands, Carolina won that one 31-6. He'd love for them to be able to repeat that performance, but they will have a lot of work to do to be able to do that. Syracuse, really, really good offensive team, 38.2 points per game, 462.4 yards of total offense, 271.8 passing yards per game, 190.6 rushing yards per game. Garrett Schrader, one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the entire country, not only this year, but is the active leader in rushing touchdowns for a quarterback. He teams in the backfield with LaQuint Allen, who helps create one of the best running back duos in the entire country. Both guys over 340 yards rushing so far this year. 3 receivers over 200 yards already this year, which is big for them because they are missing their biggest target tight end, Orenday Gadsden, who got injured early in the season, went down. I believe it was the 2nd game of their season. He went down. But they do have another tight end, Dan Villari, who emerged last weekend against Clemson that will definitely be worth keeping an eye on. The offensive line for them, not great. It's a veteran group, but look, they've run block pretty well, but they've allowed a lot of tackles for loss, a lot of sacks. So this is one that can be had for a Tar Heel defensive front that's playing better this year, but still has areas that they can improve. Defensively, Syracuse, I think it's honestly more of a statement about what their schedule has been so far. They're coming off a game where they allowed almost 400 yards of total offense to Clemson, allowed 31 points. But coming into this game, they're allowing 14.8 points per game, just 297.2 yards of total offense, 200.8 passing yards per game, 96.4 rushing yards per game. Defensively, there's a bunch of different guys that are standouts for this group. And it really starts, at linebacker, a guy that Marlowe Wax, the starting linebacker, who is off to a tremendous start, leads the team in tackles. The other two linebackers, good, not great. That's probably the worst area of this team. But you go back to really good safeties back there. Elijah Clark might be their best defensive player, overall, when you look at, just how he grades out according to Pro Football Focus. Justin Barron is the rover, which is sort of that hybrid safety linebacker type player. He actually leads the team or second on the team in tackles. And then you've got Isaiah Johnson, who's had a really good year at corner. A lot of guys playing well back there in that secondary. And on the defensive front, you've got Caleb Okechukwu off the edge, who is off to a really good start. The thing about them, one of the best teams in the entire country with tackles for loss, and it's spread across the board. So it's not just one guy. They rotate a lot of different guys. So Carolina is going to have to be ready. That offensive line, which has struggled a little bit with Willie Lampkin out of the starting lineup, will have to be able to adjust, especially when they are trying to run the football. Now let's talk about some of the Tar Heels storylines heading into this game. Of course, working Tez Walker into the offense is going to be something really big for Carolina in this game. But I think you just look at the way that the passing offense has come together here so far in the last 2 weeks primarily. It's really progressed because early in the season, it really did look like a unit that could be limited. Now, you were missing Nate McCollum in the first game of the year, but then he returns, and his first game that he's really at full strength, he catches 15 passes for 165 yards. But you're also looking at, J.J. Jones during that time span playing very, very well. The tight end's now fully healthy. So, where do you stand on this passing game? I know we had questions early on. Mainly it was with Drake May turning the football over. But I feel like, at this point, he's sort of gotten that stuff kind of ironed out. And now I feel like he's in a pretty good spot overall on this passing offense. Is really what's carrying this team on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I think it's what we thought it was going to look like, just minus the 4 picks in the first 4 games. His touchdown passes are down because he's only thrown 5, but he's kind of added the rushing touchdown to kind of supplement his touchdown total. But we knew this was going to be a different passing offense. It was just going to be different under Chip Lindsey. It wasn't going to be as aggressive throwing the ball down the field because Carolina wanted to be just a better, just all-around offense and one that really would hold the ball a little bit more this year to help its defense out. And so I think the thing is that despite his quote-unquote struggles at times, whenever he's need to make a throw or two, he's made those throws. And that's why you like having that guy, taking shotgun snaps. So I think it's going to be interesting just to see what it looks like this week because with Tez in the fold, there's no doubt that this is a more dynamic offense. But I don't want them to get away from their principles and what they've done really, really well so far this year, which is, utilizing that short passing game as an extension of their run game, getting Drake in an early rhythm early on. And, by the time, you get to the second half, he's picking apart defenses left and right. So, look, we saw Cade Klubnik last week have really good success against this Syracuse defense. And I don't think Cade Klubnik is half as good a quarterback as Drake May is. So, in a game that could have shootout written all over it, I feel like Drake May is poised to have maybe his best performance so far of the year.
Yeah, and I hope so. And I mean, look, I think What would help him is if he could get a running game that's more consistent than we've seen the last 2 weeks. Part of that is how healthy is Willie Lampkin, and I think that's really the other big storyline here is that what does this Tar Heel run game look like? Yeah, this passing offense has been really, really good. You're getting a guy back in Tez Walker that you're hoping can continue to build upon that and improve it. But at the same time, I mean, there's just no knowing at this point if this is going to be able to sustain itself, especially against a team in Syracuse that, yeah, I mean, last week Cade Klubnik was able to get him. You've got a guy that, the thing that really went well for Syracuse, for Clemson last week against Syracuse was the emergence of Tyler Brown. I mean, he, emerged the previous game, but this was really his breakout game where he had, I believe it was 13 catches, 124 yards. He may have had another reception or two later on in the game, but that was where he was at one point, which is similar to what we saw from Nate McCullum in the game against Minnesota. So Carolina has a guy that's capable of doing that to Syracuse's defense, but you got to imagine that Syracuse is going to want to bounce back. That offensive line from Clemson is not great, but neither is Carolina's. So, who knows if Syracuse is going to dial up the pressure, what they're going to be able to do. So for me, I think it is important that Carolina finds a way to be able to run the ball better because I think they've got the running backs to do it. In my mind, there's no question. I think Amarian Hampton has shown early on this season that he is, learned from what happened in his freshman year. I mean, he's got 7 touchdowns already this year. We saw him dominate the game against App State. And now you're going to have a guy in British Brooks who, played in the game against Pittsburgh, but was still, coming off the game that he had to miss earlier in the season against App State. So now you would imagine he's going to be 100% healthy. This, as long as they have Willie Lampkin back, which I think is a real key because I do think that's been part of the issue with them being able to run the ball. I think this is a chance for Carolina's run game to sort of get going a little bit. I know, Clemson, they ran for 125 yards the other day, which is all right, much better than some of the teams earlier in the year had done against Syracuse. But I really do think that Carolina, in order to move the football consistently in this game, they're going to have to be able to start running the football a little bit more, especially with not only in this game, but the stretch of opponents they have coming up.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And look, like the last 2 rushing performances haven't been great. They left a lot to be desired. Those are the 2 of the better defensive lines Carolina will see all year until they see Clemson's defensive or Duke's defensive line and Clemson's defensive line in the month of November. So only way I would really be discouraged is if they can't move Syracuse around up front. Like if this is a game where Carolina can establish the run and you're having to go, air Drake to move the ball up and down the field, then it might be time to question, what the offensive line maybe has regressed after a really strong start of the year where I thought they moved South Carolina's defensive line around. They pushed App State all around in the home opener a few weeks ago. So, I think I like Carolina's offensive line a little bit better than Clemson's. I don't know if Hampton and our guys are as good as Will Shipley and Phil Maffa, but I think they could have good production against Syracuse's defense. So I think as much as anything that this game lends to Carolina maybe having its most complete performance so far against a Power 5 opponent.
Yeah, and that's what we're hoping for offensively. Defensively, there's a lot that goes into this one for Carolina. And I think, in terms of the headlines, I think the first thing that you got to look at for the Tar Heels is that this defense, this is kind of where we expected them to be at coming into the year. Maybe not expected, but that we were hoping they would be at. This is a group that's allowing 22 points per game. That's right around the number that they allowed back in 2015 when this defense was really, really good under Gene Chizik. But they're still allowing some yards. We knew that was going to happen. The area that they've really taken a step, and I get it, Minnesota, Pittsburgh's passing games are not great. You're talking about a Minnesota passing offense that had a quarterback that completed 11 passes of 30 attempted. And you're talking about a Pittsburgh passing game that started out with Phil Dracovic, who is now converted to tight end as of this week, and Christian Velo, who, I got to be honest, the dude couldn't hit a deep shot if his life depended on it. So this is going to be a much different challenge against Garrett Schrader, a guy who has been around for a while, who, is much more capable of winning games with his arm. He would prefer to win with his legs on the ground. So this is going to be a truly different test for this defense, which has stood up pretty well in the passing game the last few weeks. The rushing game, they had a good start to the year in the first game. They've sort of fallen off since. But now this is the first time that you're going to have to face a mobile quarterback, and that's going to be a huge test for Carolina tomorrow.
Yeah, you're not wrong. We know Dino Babers likes to play a very fast brand of football, so I think one thing Carolina's got to be mindful of is figuring out who they want to sub, how they want to sub them, because we know Syracuse, especially in this era where the clock doesn't stop, they really want to get their tempo off of first downs. But I think this is going to be a really good test for Carolina, because I thought Syracuse was able to move the ball on Clemson's defense. Turnovers kind of did them in, and it was really the physicality, I thought, is where Clemson was able to win that game defensively. And we've seen Carolina at times play very physical. You go back to the South Carolina game, I thought they were fantastic. In the last 2 weeks, they were very physical in the passing game, making plays on the ball, something we haven't really seen this secondary do very successfully since Gene Chizik's first stint with Carolina as the defensive coordinator. So Schrader's going to be fired up. He's a Charlotte native, so he probably feels some sort of slight that he had to go all the way to Syracuse to play his college football. I would imagine, I can't confirm it. He grew up a Tar Heel fan, but I think he's a smart guy, so I don't think he grew up being a State or a Duke fan. So there's going to be maybe some personal motivation for him as well. But, look, this defense has done what we've asked them to do so far this year, which is not suck, be average. You're giving up 22 points per game. You do that, I'm gonna feel pretty confident week in, week out that we got a really good chance. But to me, this game, even if Carolina gives up points and gives up yards, I wouldn't be too discouraged, because the guys on the other side of the ball, they're not as bad as you might think they are, despite them playing football at Syracuse.
Well, look, this is a program that has some history to it, but this is one of those games where if it turned into a shootout, it would not shock me. So, do I want this team to be able to continue the level of play that they've had recently? Oh, of course. I think the way that they've been able to keep people off the scoreboard has been impressive. I did not think coming into the year that we were going to really see that, to be honest with you. I did think that they would be better, but I really wondered, especially early in the year. If you're telling me, if you're explaining to me what type of offenses they have faced, granted, Minnesota, Pittsburgh, not great, but look, App State's offense has been really, really good for the majority of the season. I know they're coming off of one of their worst performances of the year, having to survive against Louisiana Monroe. But you got that offense that Carolina, held in check. They held them to 27 points in regulation before, of course, eventually going into overtime and allowing a few more points there before the game came to an end. And then, of course, South Carolina, the way that passing offense has been, you're talking about Spencer Rattler. If his team wasn't just terrible around him, he could potentially be in the running for the Heisman Trophy with how well he has been playing back there by himself. And now you're preparing to face a Syracuse offense that comes in one of the tops in the country. I know that they did not play great against Clemson, but I think it's like you said. Ultimately, one of the big things Carolina's got to do, and you'll see it show up when we talk about keys to the game coming up here in a minute, they've got to be able to create turnovers in this matchup, because that's what did Syracuse in last week. They were able to move the ball at times, but there were a couple of different things that Clemson did in terms of what they threw at Garrett Schrader, how they contained him, that Carolina should be looking at and trying to implement themselves. Now, it's going to be tough because they don't have quite the athletes that Clemson has. I think they're, definitely closer than a lot of teams in the conference to being where Clemson is at in terms of the type of athletes that they've recruited. But I still think it's going to be, one of those things that Carolina is going to have to find a way at times just to hold on. And then, one of the other things that I think you're going to have to do, for Carolina is you've got to find a way to slow this running game down just in general. Yeah, you've got, the normal running game that has hurt you with running backs, here in the past couple of games. I mean, Pittsburgh, it was Rodney Hammond. You, of course, had in the game against Minnesota, Sean Tyler was the guy who killed you. But this game, LaQuinn Allen is a very justifiably good running back who has run for already nearly 400 yards this year. And you've got the quarterback who can move on the ground as well. I think it all starts up front. Carolina's got to win at the line of scrimmage. And mainly it starts with those interior defensive linemen, which just continue to struggle. Now, the edge rushers haven't been much better in run defense. They've been getting pushed back. They've had trouble containing the edges. There's no doubt about that. But if you get penetration through the middle of your defense, it will help to stop those issues that you have on the edge. So Carolina, if they can't run defend better in this game, that's what I think could turn this thing ultimately into a track meet, because if Syracuse can run the ball early, it's going to open up that passing game.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're into conference season now, and so you gotta be good at the areas that matter the most, and stopping the run is one of them. And we've seen this team, for the most part, I think, do a pretty good job. But, there were some leaks, and teams are going to go back to what App State did and try to copy that, because App State was able to run the ball on you pretty much, it felt like, at will on the edges. And so I think that's where it starts. If Carolina can set the edge and funnel the things back inside, you've got two linebackers that you feel pretty confident they're going to be there to fill the gaps and fill the holes and make the plays. And the biggest thing for this game is that you got to account for the quarterback, which has been an issue for this program for what feels like a decade and a half almost. And the biggest thing is that if they're able to run the ball, it's going to set up, the play action pass. It's going to set up the ability for them to take deep shots. And you're putting a secondary that has had its good moments. You're putting those guys in one-on-one situations. And in today's day and age, that typically means penalties, because the guys are gonna, if they're getting beat, they're gonna commit fouls. So, the thing is you've had 2 weeks to prepare for this, and this is where really the coaching is really gonna come into question, because the staff knows about the bye week number, where they're 0-4 and they're giving up over 40 points per game in those 4 bye week losses. And giving up over 200 yards on the ground. That has been talked about and has been addressed. And we're going to see if this team collectively as coaching staff and players, if they're up for the challenge on Saturday afternoon.
Well, yeah, I mean, as you said, I think that's really the biggest storyline when you talk about this game is the Tar Heels struggle coming off of bye weeks. Now, as you mentioned, 3 of them have been against Notre Dame, which is a team that now at this point, look, if you haven't learned, this team's won 30 straight against ACC opponents in the regular season. They just have the ACC's number. It's almost as if they should be a full member of this conference. That may actually work out pretty well for them, but, whatever. The thing is ultimately, for Carolina, I think this has been a year of trying to kill those types of curses, those humps that you have to get over. Look, the game against South Carolina, the Tar Heels had to get over that hump against a team that had really owned them the last few years, or the last stretch of years. They, of course, had the win back in 2019 in the opener. But other than that, Carolina had really struggled against South Carolina. So people worried about that. They end up finding a way to win that game out of the gate. You had the game, against Pittsburgh, where Carolina not only had to get over their struggles against the Panthers under Mac Brown, but also had to get over the not the hump of being 3-0, failing to get to 4-0 for so many different years from 97 until this year. They end up clearing that, not to mention the one, if you want to consider it, the fact that Carolina had not won under Mac Brown in the Stormtrooper uniforms. They get over that one as well. So, I mean, look, Carolina's broken all of these different types of streaks. This is one where, bye weeks, for some reason, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, especially with where the bye weeks have been placed at times. Last year you had 2 of them, so you had one early in the year, but the other ones have been really sort of in the middle of the season. So you would feel like, okay, that allows you to sort of get re-energized. But I think, for Carolina, this one might be important. And I hope that, look, even if this was setting up to be one of those types of scenarios where Carolina comes out and struggles coming off the bye week, maybe the fact that Tez Walker's situation ends up getting resolved, that this was something the whole team was sort of fighting for, maybe that gives the added boost that they need to get over this hump. Because, to me, for Carolina, if they get to 5-0, I think you're feeling really good, because if not, look, you're going to lose a game to a Syracuse team that who knows how good they're going to end up being the rest of the year. And then, that could set you up for disappointment next weekend against a Miami team that could come in really feeling themselves. So, look, I'm not saying this is a must-win by any stretch of the imagination, but it feels like this is a really great opportunity to finally slow down that bye week. The issues that you've had coming off of bye weeks, especially since you could face Notre Dame again next year, and that could be the game that you have to play after your bye week.
Yeah, look, you only get 12 of them. So I think in that regard, they're all must-wins. And you look at the ACC championship game, trying to get back to Charlotte with no divisions, the 2 best teams, barring something unforeseen, Florida State's going to Charlotte. So there's a handful of teams that are going to be vying for that second spot. And look, I know Clemson's got 2 ACC losses. I'm not riding that team and that program out because they're 2 plays away from being undefeated. As much as we want to put a nail in Dabo's dynasty, they don't fumble the ball 17 times against Duke, they win the game. And if Dabo probably manages into regulation against Florida State, they probably win the game. Louisville plays literally outside of their game tomorrow night when Notre Dame comes to town. They play nobody the rest of the year. It's kind of like Duke's basketball non-conference schedule. It's cupcake after cupcake, and that offense is for real. And they could be a team that in a year with no divisions could be like the Coastal winner a lot of years where they just got there because of their schedule. And then you got Miami. I think a game that the next week that will probably eliminate one of the 2 teams from being legitimate contenders because both teams have to play Clemson as the ACC season does, in fact, move along. And so, look, you're trying to go from good to great. To do that, you got to go from 4-0 to 5-0. This is a game that is at home. It's in your backyard. You've been very good at home under Mac Brown. You've got the better quarterback. You've got more talent. You've got more depth. This is a game that Carolina in every facet should win. But there are things when you look at this program and look at how much they struggle off bye week scenarios, how much they have struggled handling success. It does raise cause for concern about how this is all going to go play out tomorrow on the football field. But if this team is the team that we think that it is, and it's a team that is capable of getting to Charlotte, this is a game they should win, and it should win rather comfortably.
Well, that's the ultimate thing. I think, when you look at the schedule that Carolina has, as opposed to some of these other teams, you're going to have chances to pick up, bigger wins. And what is that doing? Is that helping you get to the college football playoff? That would be what you're looking at in terms of the stronger schedule. But you mentioned it. You can't lose many games in conference. I think you can probably afford to lose 1 to keep yourself in contention. Other than that, you're done, because there is no way that Syracuse or that Louisville is going to lose multiple games in conference. I mean, their conference schedule is the easiest that I may have ever seen in the history of this conference, and that's saying something. So, I mean, for Carolina, in order to stay in the race, they're going to need to win it. And as you mentioned, I think the thing that this game is going to show you is this team, is this program really going from good to great? Because I'm going to tell you, so far this year, I'm buying that they are. They're 4-0 for the first time in 26 years. They've beaten every opponent except Appalachian State by double digits despite not playing their best game. This would be a great time for that best game to come out for Carolina and for them to show that, look, these are the types of games, as you mentioned, these are the types of games that we've seen Carolina lose before when it feels like things are going really well. It sort of resets where your expectations are at for the team. You got to avoid that from happening again in this matchup. And if you can do that, I think that is going to put you. I think if they win, and especially if they win comfortably, there are going to be a lot of Tar Heel fans that are going to feel really good going into next week against Miami, regardless of what happens this weekend for the Hurricanes. That could be an undefeated matchup. And look, if you win, there's a chance that you could have College game day on campus.
Yeah, they're going to be in Seattle for Washington and Oregon.
I mean, yeah, it's possible. You never really know, especially in the Pac-12. You really don't
they're
know.
They're going to be in Seattle.
But, well, it is Miami, though. That's the only counter that I would give that any excuse, especially because we've seen this from Miami before, right? Where they have good starts of the year, and then once they pick up a loss or two, things really start to spiral out of control. So that's the thing. You never know. But even if you don't, the fact that you would have that important of a matchup and that there's a chance you would be favored in that matchup, I think would show you that you're really taking yourself to the next level as a program. When it comes to the keys to the game, number one in this game is to contain Garrett Schrader. And that really means contain him on the ground, force him to have to win the game through the air, because I'm going to tell you, that was the plan that Clemson had coming into last week, and they did a great job at it. Now, when it comes to containing him, look, it's not going to be easy. There's a reason this guy has been as successful as he has on the ground. I think the biggest thing that Carolina has to do in this game is they have to be smart about how they rush the passer. Yes, this is a group on the offensive line for Syracuse that has allowed a lot of tackles for loss. They've allowed a lot of sacks early on in the season. But at the same time, one of the things that we've seen for years from Carolina is that guys get way too far upfield on that defensive line when they are rushing the passer. What Clemson did so well last week was, yes, they got after the quarterback. Yes, they were able to sack him a few times. But at the same time, they did a great job of staying in position around him to keep him in the pocket. If he's going to bail out, make him have to bail out to the side and run all the way around. That's going to allow your linebackers to cover space and be able to get there. It's going to give them more time to close in on the quarterback. And the other thing is, look, in order to contain him, if that means you have to have somebody that is spying him for the majority of the day, you have to do that. You have to trust your guys that are in coverage one-on-one. I think they've shown you the last couple of weeks that they have the capabilities to do that. This is a defensive back unit that I feel like is in a much, much better place than they've been in years past. It's up to Carolina to find a way to take away running quarterbacks like they have not been able to do in the past. We saw, the other night against Pittsburgh, we saw Phil Dracovic and even Voliere. I think I pronounced his name wrong earlier, I'm pretty sure. But, I mean, guess what? Get good and I'll learn how to pronounce your name. We saw them be able to run on the edges. Carolina's got to find a way to be able to take that away in this one if they want to get the victory.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So, look, I think this is as I guess a good a barometer test, right, for Carolina as you're talking about trying to taking that next step. Because this is a good football team. I kind of made a running joke that if we lose at home to Syracuse football, someone should be fired. So, but this is a good football team. And this is kind of like what it's been really since week one. It's just another test for this team, this program to pass. And that's what's next on the list for Carolina. And we'll see if they're up for the challenge tomorrow afternoon in Kenan Stadium.
Yeah, the other thing that I had is win on third down. That's my second key to the game. When you look at what Carolina has done so successfully early in the season, it's been that they have found a way to win consistently on third down. They have the second best offensive percentage on third down so far this year. Syracuse, middle of the pack defensively, 52nd in defensive third down percentage. And that's, a thing that's, I think, for Carolina, because they struggle so much on first and second down offensively, they have been forced to win on third down. The ideal thing is, look, win even more on first and second down, and then we don't have to worry about third down. But right now, that just isn't happening. So in order for them to win this game, they have to be successful offensively on third down, and then defensively. Look, I think you had the game against App State where they let up a lot of third down conversions, a lot of third down and long conversions as well. But really, outside of that, they've done a good job on third down of getting off the field. They've, first and second down offensively, Mac Brown talked about we want to be better there this year. I think they have been a little bit. I know that teams have had success running the ball against them on first and second down, but it still feels like at times, the good majority of the third downs that teams are faced with are third and medium, third and long when Carolina is able to get off the field. They have to first win on first and second down to get them into those third downs. But most importantly, they need to be able to win on third down, because if you don't, it's going to create the type of shootout that you saw against App State. So third down's big key for this game.
I think whatever team wins the third down battle has the better chance of opposing their will and wearing out the other team. So if Carolina can convert more often than not on their third down opportunities offensively, a better chance for them to use their tempo and really wear down Syracuse's defense. But on the flip side, if Carolina can't get off the field and you see Syracuse in 3rd and 2s and 3rd and 3s and Garrett Trader's legs come into play, it makes it harder for you to defend. Over time, they're going to use their tempo and then try to wear you out. And so, I mentioned, when you get into conference play, all the things that matter in football, they really go to another level. It's winning the turnover battle, not making penalties, or not committing penalties. And whatever team wins the third down battle, you'd probably look at the box score and say those teams are going to win the game more often. And so I'm very confident. I think Carolina will convert their third down opportunities because they're getting a dynamic playmaker back in Tez Walker. I think they'll be able to run the ball a little bit better, so they won't be in obvious passing downs as much on third down. The question is going to be defensively what they do, because I think Gene Chizik has shown when we've gotten opponents into obvious passing downs, he hasn't been as afraid to blitz as much. Whereas he, last year felt like he just never wanted to bring the pressure because that young secondary has held up, and guys like Elijah Huzzy, they're going to do their jobs. And so I think if Carolina can get Syracuse into 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6 more often than not, it gives Carolina's defense a better chance of getting off the field, and with that, a better chance to win the ball game.
Yeah, and then the final key to the game, I kind of went back and forth on this. Told you earlier we've talked about, creating turnovers, and I do think that's important. But I'm going to stick with my initial thing here that I wrote down when I was typing out the article earlier tonight, which will go up moments after this edition of the podcast has concluded, by the way. I'm going to go with getting off to a fast start. I really think, creating turnovers is important, but I do think that, Carolina has the ability to win a shootout. The biggest thing for me is that you saw last week with Syracuse, once they got down in that game against Clemson, they were never really able to claw themselves back in. Clemson, I think, did a really good job of, sort of starting to run the football a little bit more during that middle portion of the game, trying to shorten the game. Carolina can do it even better than Clemson can, I think, in terms of because, we've seen it at times this year. If you watch Clemson this year, I mean, Will Shipley has not been great. Phil Maffa's been their more effective running back. But I really think, at times, Clemson doesn't have as nearly as mobile a quarterback as Carolina does. So I think, we've seen Carolina late in games, even if when they haven't been able to run the ball, still find a way to shorten games. I think that's what Carolina is going to want to do in this game. But in order to do that, they have to get off to a quick start. And I think they are more than capable of doing that. I think it needs to look a lot like what we saw against Minnesota. I think, you're hoping that Drake May can come out feeling himself a little bit. Maybe Tez Walker can sort of surprise Syracuse a little bit over the top, because remember, one thing that's interesting about him coming back is there is no film on him at Carolina. There's film on him in his time at Kent State, which they can go off of. But this guy hasn't played a snap for Carolina yet, outside of what? Maybe you watched the spring game back. So there could be some things early on that they're able to surprise Syracuse with, and then hopefully as the day goes along, they're able to wear them down. But I think if they get off to a fast start in this game, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But heck, if they could even create a couple of turnovers, get off the field, relatively quickly defensively, and get out to an early lead, I think as we saw against Minnesota, when they can do that, it allows them to sort of sustain the flow of the game and ultimately keep a comfortable lead, which was what I think everybody's hoping for tomorrow against the Orange.
Yeah, there's really no excuse not to come out ready to play. You've had a week off. You're going to be at home in front of what's going to be not only a sold-out crowd, but a crowd that's going to be charged up with the Tez Walker news. This game's on ESPN, so it's going to be in front of a national audience. And Carolina needs to use all of that to their advantage and come out ready. Because if you spot 14 points really quickly, and you make Syracuse become one-dimensional, and they got to start throwing the ball to get back in the game. All that stuff favors you. But if this is a game where it's kind of like, the App State game where you're trying to feel each other out, maybe it becomes something where, both teams get established, and then like the App State game, you're in for a shootout. So I think you'll see Carolina have a good scripted first drive. I think Chip Lindsey, for the most part, has done a very good job with the first drives of the game so far this year. If we can come out and get a stop and a score, or a score then a stop, get that environment even a little bit more racked up, you could see a Syracuse team like you saw last week against Clemson be in a position where they're folding before halftime.
Yeah, I think it's more than possible. So let's get into it. Predictions for this game tomorrow, 3:30 on, what is it, ESPN or ABC?
I believe so. It's an ESPN vehicle.
ESPN. That's what I thought. What do you got in this game, bud?
I feel like I think Carolina's going to win the game. I think Carolina should win the game rather comfortably, but I'm a lifelong Tar Heel football fan. I've seen this program in moments like this where they should kick someone's butt, not kick someone's butt. I was just 6 months there. Last year they were a distracted football team and they lost at home to Georgia Tech. I don't think we're going to relive that letdown. I've got Carolina winning still by 2 possessions. I've got it 31-20, even though it should be, in my opinion, something like 38-17.
Well, I mean, yeah, either one of those results to me would be perfectly fine, because I'm with you. I really do think Syracuse is a better team than a lot of people want to give them credit for, especially I think Garrett Schrader is a heck of a quarterback. I think there will be times early in the game where he will affect Carolina with his legs, but I really do think as this game progresses along, we've seen Syracuse's offensive line struggle a little bit. I think Carolina is a much smarter defense than they were a year ago. So I really do think Carolina will find a way in this game to, eventually slow down that running game. I think, offensively, I think early, they will, try to come out throwing the ball a little bit, more than they probably have early in the season. I think they know at this point, especially it really depends on whether or not Willie Lampkin is playing. If he's playing, Carolina will try to run the ball a little bit, but this is a pass defense that was exposed a little bit last week. I think, there might be a look for Tez Walker early in the game, but I think Nate McCullum will be huge in this game for Carolina because I think he can do a lot of the same things that Tyler Brown did a week ago. I think Drake May is an even more talented quarterback than the one that Clemson faced or that Syracuse faced a week ago against Clemson. I think Carolina, they get out to a pretty quick start. I like Carolina, to get out maybe to a 2-possession lead early second quarter, and I think they sort of run away with it from there. And I think it's very similar to what we saw against Minnesota, even to a certain extent against Pittsburgh. Now that hopefully they won't have to battle back like in that game, but I think Minnesota will kind of be what you expect to see with a little more scoring on the Syracuse side of things. I like Carolina to get the job done in this one, 41-24 over the Syracuse Orange. So that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast, guys. Make sure you head over to the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Got the article going up there for you guys here shortly, which will have all the stuff that it normally does, team breakdowns, team stat comparisons. You'll have the keys to the game where I go even more in depth than we did when we talked about them here. You've got the injury reports on both sides. Not only Carolina's that has a lot of guys on it, but Syracuse's does as well. So make sure you check that out. And then, of course, all the information that you need for the game, which is set for tomorrow, 3:30 ESPN, of course, inside Kenan Stadium. If you guys are going, sold out event as well. So really love to see that for Carolina's return home to Chapel Hill, which will be 3 straight games in Chapel Hill. So Tar Heels with a chance to really get themselves rolling before then, of course, coming down the stretch and facing that difficult ending that Mac Brown talked so much about in the offseason. Other stuff that is on the website right now, of course, the article about Tez Walker, being freed by the NCAA. So make sure you guys go and check that out as well. And then we do have some recruiting stuff up there that we've been putting up throughout these last couple of weeks. We'll, of course, keep you up to date with anything that's going on that side. Basketball side of things, man, things are starting to really heat up as Carolina gets closer and closer to the start of the season. Believe it or not, we are closing in on a month from the start of the year. So this is, going to be a really hyped up season. I know you had Hubert Davis meet with the media yesterday. He talked a lot about all the different guys that are on the team, and he was very, very excited. So I think, there was some cautious optimism early in the offseason. I think as we're progressing along here, Tar Heel fans are really starting to feel like this team has a chance to be really, really good this year, and Josh is going to have you covered on the blog side of things. With that, me and him, of course, will have you covered on the Four Corners podcast all throughout the year. So that's going to wrap it up once again for this edition of the show. We want to thank you guys for watching and listening. I want to thank Josh for hosting with me. And as always, go Tar Heels.